Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Ratri Pratna Lestari, and I'm gonna explain my material about the history of American modernism. American modernism, much like the modernism movement in general, is a trend of philosophical thought arising from the widespread change in culture and society in the age of modernity. American modernism is an artistic and cultural movement in the United States beginning at the turn of the 20th century with a short period between World War I and World War II. Like its European counterpart, American modernism stemmed from a rejection of Enlightenment thinking, seeking to better represent reality in a new, more industrialized world. Characteristically, modernist art has a tendency to abstraction, is innovative, aesthetic, futuristic, and self-referential. It includes visual art, literature, music, film, design, architecture, as well as lifestyle. It ranks against historicism, artistic conventions, and institutionalization of art. American modernism marked the beginning of American art as distinct and autonomous from European taste by breaking artistic conventions that had been shaped after European traditions. Until then, American modernism benefited from the diversity of immigrant cultures. Artists were inspired by African, Caribbean, Asian, and European folk cultures and embed this exotic style in their works. The modernism American movement was a reflection of American life in the 20th century in the quickly industrializing world, and as pace of life, it was easy for the individual to be swallowed up by the vastness of things, left wondering devoid of purpose. Social boundaries in race, class, sex, wealth, and religion were being challenged. Modernist America had to find common ground in world no longer unified in belief. The unity found lay in the common ground of the shared consequences within all human experience. The importance of the individual was emphasized, the truly unlimited nature of the human experience, from a bond across all bridges of race, class, sex, wealth, or religion. Society in this way found shared meaning even in disarray. The Great Depression at the end of the 20th century and during the 18th century disillusioned people about the economic stability of the country and the era utopianist thinking. The outbreak and the terrors of World War II caused further change in mentality. The post-war period that followed was termed late modernism. The postmodernist era was generally considered characteristic of the art of the late 20th century beginning in the 19th and 80s. Okay, I think that's enough. The material will be continued by my friend.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Elsa Gustriansar. So the next material is lifestyle in American modernist period. So the modernist movement caused vast change in societies in which it took place. With the introduction of industrial developments, the American people start to enjoy the outcome of the new modernist era. Everyday life and culture are the areas that reflected the social change in the habits of the society. Developments that occur with modernism influence American people life standard and gave way to new style of living. Referring to fashion, usually one will think of dressing style or costumes. Of course, dressing style is a very important category of the word fashion. On the other hand, fashion has more meanings and could be explained and founding many other fields such as architecture, body type, dance and music, and even forms of speech and etc. So, the first is costumes. In the early 1920s, the ready-to-wear fashion began to spread America. More women earned their own wage and didn't want to spend time on fittings. Fashion as the status symbol was no more important as class distinction were becoming blurred. The next is furniture. There's no pure American modern style in the design world. The American modern artists inherit the style characterized by simplicity of form, absence of decorate ornament, and focus on functional concept from their precedents. At the same time, the American designer blended the wild style of Parisian painting as well as the feature of modern architecture in their work, such as Art Deco. Moreover, the designer also placed much emphasis on the materials, especially those invented in the modern age. Okay, I think that's all from me. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, I will explain about culture in American Modernism period. In American Modernism period have two culture. The first is jazz, and then the second is visual art. Jazz. Early in the 20th century, jazz evolved from the blues tradition, but also incorporated many other musical and cultural elements. In New Orleans, often considered the birthplace of jazz, musicians benefit from an influx of Spanish and French colonial influence. In this city, a unique mix of ethnic culture and looser resist prohibition allow African Americans to be more influential than in other parts of the South. The resulting music adopted the sound of new brass instruments. During the Great Migration, jazz spread from New Orleans to New York, Chicago, and other cities. New York City became the new center for the jazz era. Jazz, the music of integration. Central elements of American culture has its roots in black slave culture. The music incorporates elements of African call and response patterns into its instrumentation and chorus. At first, jazz was viewed critical by section of the white population, who thought that jazz and rhythm were the barbaric accident and explosion, and denigrated the genre as the product of not innovators, but incompetence. Acceptance of jazz soon spread throughout the Atlantic, and by the mid 20th century had made international, and then today jazz is considered an integral and dynamic part of American culture, a unique Native American music, representative of Afro-American culture and around the world. Jazz as American. A compilation article that appeared in the New York Times in 19 and 23rd state jazz an American contribution to art. It is recognized worldwide as part of the musical folklore of this century of this country. It is as strong and distinctly American as the Monroe Doctrine or the 4th of July. Or baseball, American jazz start from its roots. Jazz is product of American, a distinct cultural group from America, although the early blues signs fitly the sorrow of the displays. Like the country in which it was created was blends spread ethnic and cultural influence into a new and distinct product. Combine elements of black identity with the other immigrant influence. Jazz is very American in that it blends the character of different people, but still allows the individual to opportunity to express himself in improved souls. And because it emphasizes the rough individualism that has characterized the nation. And then the last, jazz as modern. Jazz is very modern in sound. Daniel Gregory Mason says that jazz is so compatible with robots that one can be deduced from the other. Thus, jazz is a musical reflection of modernism in industrial capitalism, and jazz is also equated with a stunning sound. I think that's all for me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Raipan and I will explain about American modernist literature. American modernist literature was a dominant trend in American literature between World War I and World War II. The modernist era highlighted innovation in the form and language of poetry and prose, as well as addressing numerous contemporary topics such as race relations, gender, and the human condition. Many American modernists became expatriated in Europe during this time, often becoming stalwarts in the European movement, as will be the case for T.S. Eliot, Ezra Pound, and Gertrude Stein. These writers were often known as the Lost Generation. As a reaction to this trend, many American authors and poets began a trend of nativism, seeking to represent the modern American experience in America. Notable contributors to this trend include Carlos Williams, Wallace Stevens, and Marianne Moore. These poets were often critical of the works of expatriate writers such as Eliot and Pound, as evidenced by poems like Spring and All. Influenced by the First World War, many American modernist writers explored the psychological wounds and spiritual scars of the war experience. The economic crisis in America at the beginning of the 1930s also left a mark on literature, such as John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath. Nevertheless, all these negative aspects led to new hopes and aspirations to the search for a new beginning, not only for the contemporary individuals but also for the fictional characters in American modernist literature. Okay, I'm going to explain about the new criticism in America. From 1930 to the 1960, new criticism became a critical force in the United States. It was the most powerful perspective in American literary criticism. The representative were John Crown Grisham, Alan Tate, Clint Brooks, Robert Penn Warren. Then in And new criticism saw itself in such as work as Eliot's and Yeats' poems, poetry that best fit the aesthetic criteria of the new critics was emphasized in important classroom teaching anthologies. Morrison 29. T.S. Eliot redefined tradition in his essay, Tradition and Individual Talent. He formulated such critical concepts as object correlative and rethought the literary canon in his elevation of Jacobean drama and metaphysical poetry. His work had a fundamental influence on new criticism in America. Now I'm going to architecture and space. The United States played a great role in the Modernism movement concerning new advanced building and construction technologies. Among construction innovation, there are such materials as iron, steel, and reinforced concrete. For the example, Louis Henry Sullivan headed to the so-called Chicago School of Architecture, which was distinct by its development of functional design along with modern material. Sullivan's follower Frank Lloyd Wright absorbed from his labor master the German Romantic tradition of organic architecture. He developed a new and original approach to residential design before World War I, which became known as the Prairie style. It combined open planning principles with horizontal emphasis. Another example, volume-born architects as Richard Neutra, Rudolf Schindler, and William Lescaze during the 1920 played a great role in development of American architecture, performing later a style which got the name of International Style and was reflected in the design of corporate office buildings after World War II. Okay, I think that's all. I close by saying wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.